Sign this check over to your brother, or you're not leaving this room. My mother didn't tell me happy birthday. She simply pushed the $500,000 my grandfather had left me across the table like it was a payoff. When I didn't reach for the pen, my father stepped to the door and locked it. Then he angled his phone screen toward me. It was a picture of our front porch snapped from a black car parked in the driveway right now. The loan sharks are outside. Clara, you settle Brandon's debt, or they come inside. Before I tell you what I did with that pen, drop a comment and tell me what's the worst gift a family member has ever given you. I'm reading every single one. I glanced at the locked door, then back at my parents. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. In my line of work, when you spot a discrepancy in the ledger, you don't scream, you investigate. And right now, the discrepancy sat in the center of the table. A dry store-bought cupcake with a single unlit candle. I stared at that pitiful little cake, and for a brief second, I wasn't 29. I was 10 years old again, sitting at the same table, clenching my eyes shut, and wishing with everything I had that my parents would look at me the way they looked at Brandon. I wished that just once I wouldn't be the invisible tuition payment or the future retirement fund, but their daughter. I looked at Linda's knuckles pale as she gripped the check, and Gregory's eyes flicking toward the window where the black car idled. They weren't here to celebrate my life. They were here to strip it to rescue their son. In that moment, I mentally leaned forward and blew out that 10-year-old's candle. The smoke didn't smell like birthday wax. It smelled like a bridge going up in flames. The daughter in me died in that chair, and the forensic auditor took control. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I leaned back and let my pulse steady. Fear makes people foolish, and right now, I needed to be the sharpest person in the room. If I sign this check, I said, my voice eerily calm, Brandon is dead by morning. Linda blinked, her hostility wavering for a moment. What are you talking about? It's money. It saves him. It's $500,000. Mother, you don't just hand that over. The moment I endorse this to Brandon, the bank files a suspicious activity report. It's automatic for any transfer over $10,000. For $500,000, they freeze the account for a minimum of 7 days for an AML review. Anti-money laundering. If those sharks don't get their cash by sunrise, they come through that door. And if the IRS sees Brandon receiving $500,000 with no documented source, they seize it for back taxes before he can pay anyone. Gregory glanced at his phone again. He was perspiring. So, what do we do? We can't wait 7 days. We have to make it appear legitimate. I lied. The lie tasted like copper, metallic, and electric. We need to conceal the asset. If the sharks run a background check and see you own this house, they'll know you have equity. They'll take the cash and then they'll pressure you to sign over the deed anyway, just for the interest. You need asset protection. I saw the greed spark in Gregory's eyes. He didn't want to save Brandon. He wanted to save his house. How? We transfer the title of this house into a blind trust tonight. An anonymous LLC. I structured it as a corporate acquisition. The money transfers immediately as a business transaction, bypassing the personal hold. The sharks run a search. They see you own nothing. You're judgment-proof. The funds clear. Brandon settles with them, and the house rests safely in the trust until the heat fades. It was an intricate web of fiction blended with just enough financial jargon to sound alarmingly real. I watched them trade a glance. They didn't know I was lying because they never cared enough to ask what I actually did for a living. They just knew I managed money. Do it, Linda said, sliding the laptop toward me. Fix this. I opened the screen. The blue glow reflected in my eyes, masking the fact that I wasn't rescuing them. I was digging their grave. Dad hurried out of the room to grab his laptop, his footsteps heavy and frantic against the hardwood. He was rushing to bring the shovel I was about to use to bury him. I sat there in the quiet with Linda. She was watching me, her chest rising and falling, probably congratulating herself on finding the right button to press. She thought she had shattered me. She thought she was staring at a daughter who had finally fallen into place. But she was staring at a creditor. I glanced around the room while we waited. It truly was a beautiful dining room. Hand-cut Italian marble floors, custom wainscoting, a crystal chandelier that likely cost more than my first car. I knew exactly how much all of it cost because I knew precisely where the money came from. It didn't come from Gregory's job. It came from my femur. When I was 18, a semi-truck ran a red light and slammed into my sedan. I spent 3 months in traction and learned to walk again before I went to prom. The insurance settlement was significant. $185,000. Pain and suffering, they called it. I remember the day the check arrived. Linda held my hand. She told me I was too young to manage that kind of money. She said they would place it in a secure investment account for me for when I was ready to buy a home or start a family. I believed them. I was 18, and I was hurting, and they were my parents. 2 months later, Brandon drove his pickup truck through the front window of a liquor store. He blew .18. It should have been prison. It should have been a felony record. But suddenly, my parents had the cash for the best criminal defense attorney in the state. Brandon received probation. The charges were expunged. And when I asked about my investment account a year later, Linda told me the market had crashed. She lied to my face without hesitation. I didn't know the truth then. I know it now. I traced the transfers myself 3 years ago when I earned my certification. They drained my pain and suffering to purchase Brandon's freedom. They took the payout for my shattered leg and used it to repair their golden child's disasters. And it didn't end there. While they were remodeling this house, installing the marble floors in the new wing, I was living in a basement studio in the city that reeked of black mold and cat litter. I was surviving on instant noodles and pulling double shifts to pay for textbooks because my college fund had mysteriously vanished to cover Brandon's gambling losses in Vegas. They sat in comfort, funded by my trauma, and they let me decay. I looked at Linda now. She was straightening the tablecloth, restless, glancing at the door for Gregory. She had no idea that every luxury in this room, every asset she was terrified of losing to the loan sharks had already been paid for by me. Taking this house wasn't stealing. It wasn't a con. It was reimbursement. I was simply collecting on a debt that had been accruing interest for 11 years. "You're doing the right thing, Clara," Linda said, mistaking my silence for reflection. "Family helps family." "I know," I said. My voice was even. "That's exactly what I'm doing." I was helping the only family member who mattered anymore. Me. Gregory came back into the room, clutching his laptop to his chest like a barrier. He placed it on the table, shoving aside a centerpiece of dried flowers that had probably cost $500. He lifted the lid, his eyes darting from the screen to the window where the imaginary black car was waiting. He typed in his password, Brandon 888, of course, and stared at the digital transfer portal I'd opened. His finger hovered over the trackpad. He was sweating. A drop of perspiration slid down his temple and disappeared into his collar. "I don't know, Linda," he muttered, his voice breaking, transferring the deed. "This feels drastic. What if the trust doesn't release it back?" "We need a lawyer to review this." "We don't have time for lawyers, Gregory," Linda snapped. "Look at the time. Look at the window." I know, but he looked at me, suspicion finally slicing through his panic. "Why are you helping us, Clara? You never help. You hoard every cent you earn. Why the sudden change of heart?" He was weak, but he wasn't completely stupid. He sensed the snare. Even if he couldn't see the teeth, I opened my mouth to spin another layer of financial jargon about equity shielding and emergency liquidity. But Linda didn't let me speak. She broke. The mask of the concerned mother disappeared, replaced by something savage. She lunged